Center team. We're so excited to dive into our keynote address that will explore how narrative change, structural equity, and trust building shaped healthier futures, and how the stories we tell, the systems we design, and the relationships we build turn vision into action. And we're all about action today for communities. It's now my honor to introduce our keynote speaker, Adair Mosley. Adair is a visionary leader reshaping the future of equity in Minnesota. He serves as the inaugural CEO of the GroundBreak Coalition, a cross-sector initiative of more than 40 partners. That is a lot. Mobilizing $5.4 billion over the next decade to transform how capital flows into communities. Over his career, he's raised more than $20 million to advance community-driven initiatives in health, housing, and economic justice. His work is rooted in justice and innovation, launching programs like Justice Built Communities, leading the North Market campaign to improve food access and health equity in North Minneapolis, and helping develop national policy solutions. As a strategist, builder, and truth teller, Adair's leadership has been recognized by Harvard's Young American Leaders Program and Twin Cities Business Magazine, which named him one of 100 people to know. Please join me in welcoming Adair, whose leadership and vision continue to redefine how we build systems rooted in community, equity, and hope.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good to be with you all. I'm recognizing that I feel like these need to be right here, but I got it. Well, first, I want to thank you for the words. You said all the things. I don't know which more I have to say, but I'll add a little color to the work that I've done over the last 15 years or so across the metro here. But let me start by just saying thank you to the wonderful leaders and visionaries of this event. I'm hearing that last year was such a success that we had to move to a new location, and it keeps growing, and all the individuals who are deeply concerned about our communities and wanting to move them forward. Let me also just name that I am just like humbled to be in a room with people who are thinking about these big questions and trying to figure out solutions across our community. Each of you in your organizations in which you represent, or whether you're here as an individual, demonstrates an empathetic approach. And because of that, I believe our communities are better because you are in them. I want to also say I don't have the solutions. I can certainly, the work that I've done can continue to serve as an inspiration, but I think solutions, as we all know, sit in community. They sit with people who have been pushed to the margins. And so my work is only here to inspire you to continue to go to the margins and find them and bring those voices into every room in which you enter, in every space in which you occupy. And so today's conversation is about pushing your current thinking even further. It's about we are the connections points between economic and social opportunity, and we are the ones who are shaping the future. And I also know that we are in a moment that I believe this is movement work. And we have to be organizing like it is a movement. And movements require a few things. They require consistent and intentional messaging. They require galvanization, concentration, solidarity, and proximity. And so I think the innovators are in this room. The photos, they're in no particular order that are up there, but they just happen to represent work that I've been passionate about, or collages and things that I've led throughout our community. So as I talk over these next few minutes, I encourage you to look at those things. Most of them, outside of these more abstract images, are things that I've had my hands directly in that I'll lift up as part of this conversation. And then I understand that there'll be a few moments for some questions on the back end of this. And so let me also acknowledge the moment that we are in. I think it's important to acknowledge that this might be our new infinity, where multiple narratives, often contradicting each other, are present. This will deeply impact how strategies emerge from our work. when the broader narrative and policies will have an impact on how you shape your own strategies. You'll have to deal with this paradox. And such paradoxical moments can catalyze introspection and a call to action. They highlight the need to examine critically who we are as individuals and the systems and institutions that are born out of our thinking and biases. In these moments of confusion and tension, we search for simple answers to complex issues. Yet a nuanced understanding of a multifaceted world is needed. The solutions that arise must be multidimensional and transformative to meet this moment. Recognizing and addressing these paradoxes is crucial for achieving true social and racial justice. And so as we turn to a future that is wrestling with these incongruencies, we're reminded of a simple question that charts our direction. What does a moment need from its leaders? Navigating this paradoxical moment necessitates perseverance and open dialogue. It underscores that achieving true equity will require sustained momentum and recognizing that progress is not linear. Our future depends on us to interrogate and question the answer. But what I deeply believe that what sits on the other side of this struggle is liberation, thriving, radical futures, unhindered and unapologetic. We are presented with the greatest paradox of our time, that both things are better than and worse than before. We have to embrace that complexity. And we have to dismantle the oppressive systems that stand in the way of human progress. That's what I needed. And so I wanna, you may have seen a quick photo in there of North Market, and that was mentioned in my opening statement. And so one of the things is, I remember listening to people describe their communities and what they wanted for their children and themselves, the barriers that they face to having healthy food access in their community. And I remember that we could have responded in a traditional manner. We could have opened up another food shelf. But what people really want was for dignity to be restored in their community. So we built a grocery store. I believe we can touch the missions of our organizations every day. They are not abstract ideals sitting out there for us to never realize. We have to tell everyone that they matter, no matter their circumstances, where they are born, or what society has written about them. If you were to gather all the headlines about Black people, North Minneapolis, pick your thing, there would be a negative perception about people and place. So I understand the power of us changing the narrative about people and place. I wanted to do this a few years ago because there were students who were dealing with an immense amount of trauma at North High School, like all kids frankly across the globe, but more acutely in our own backyard where they had lost the D-Hill, and I think we were on the verge of a strike, and it was also COVID and other things. And so I wanted to tell young people that they mattered in that moment. I wanted to tell them that people saw who they were, that we believed in them. So I went out and raised $1 million and gave each of them a $10,000 scholarship to college. And it was important for me to tell them that it was without conditions. That some didn't have a plan, and some certainly were going on to Stanford and other places. But what I told them is, perhaps this was the catalyst, perhaps this was the vision for you to be able to shape it. And I think that we have to always be in this place of giving and doing without conditions. I also believe that we have to have a strategic decision right now in this moment to be hopeful and inspirational. We have made a strategic decision on the organizations that I've led across now. I'm on my third stint as CEO of an organization, and I'm in this moment of building what I believe will be a legacy building movement across our region. But it's important how I frame each and every, as I try to dismantle these impressive systems, it's important how I frame the narrative of this work. And that narrative can't be one of hopelessness, despondency, and brokenness, because it fails to acknowledge the inherent power and assets within our community. So we have to, as workers, as laborers on behalf of this work, we have to make a strategic decision. We have to commit to deliberately selecting language, ideas, and images that purposefully restore and rehumanize every individual. We recognize the central role each person plays and affirms their inherent value. So what if we only shared stories of triumph, resiliency, and unwavering drive? We view and interpret the world through the stories and our lived experiences, and those narratives today are often crafted by dominant power structures that shape our worldviews. And so if we are to create a more just society, a necessary part of that work includes changing the stories that are told and those who are telling the stories. We have to jettison the deficit-generating language and choose language of conclusion, compassion, and care. And this meant so much to me. At the time, I was Chief Strategy or Innovation Officer at Pillsbury United Communities. And Margot Ashmore, a longtime journalist in our community, was selling a newspaper. And at the time, Shonda Smith Baker, if any of you know her, now leads the St. Paul, Minnesota Foundation. I went to her and I said, Shonda, I believe this is our moment to start to tell a new narrative about North Minneapolis. So I went on a Saturday morning, we met with Margot Ashmore, and we purchased North News. And it's a community newspaper in North Minneapolis led by the great David Perini. And it was only because I wanted us to start telling our own story. I wanted people to start to shape, and that doesn't mean we shy away from the truth, but we know that there are curved and bent notes to our story. And we have to be able to tell that full human experience. And it was also so important for me that our young people start to tell their stories. And so we went to North High School and we asked the principal there at the time if we could make North News a class. And so today, now almost 8 years later, North News is still a class at North High School. And if you open the paper, you will see stories by young people, them writing, them being a journalist about their own community. And so I believe we are amidst a generational movement waiting to unleash its power. And so you must not perpetuate through narrative what you are trying to disrupt through action. This is the story we must share, one of hope, resilience, and this force of human spirit. If any of you know the work of Homeboy Industries out of LA, wonderful, wonderful organization, but Father Gregory Boyle, and I've carried this with me now probably 2 decades, he said, we need to stand in awe of what the poor have to carry rather than in judgment on how they carry it. And so as we stand in awe of what people just have to go through, I hope that we shape and tell that story of awe. What I also know as I share more with you all today is that we are at a moment where we need solutions at the scale of the challenge. We no longer can think small. We need big ideas to emerge. And that doesn't mean that I do think that the unit of change will be the individual. I do believe that it'll be your neighbor, it'll be block by block, right? The unit of change will be that. However, I think when we're referencing our institutions, that those must come together in ways that we have never dreamed of in order to achieve the type of equity and parity that we've all dreamed of. And so every generation has had their clarion call, and I believe that we are no different. We are experiencing an adaptive challenge, yet we are responding in incremental improvements. The solution requires radical and disruptive innovation, because the individuals and communities that have sent us to remove these barriers are on an urgent journey. Every day your feet hits the ground is an urgent race. And it cannot depend on increments, but rather radical and disruptive change. We are talking about achieving social and economic equity, yet we are still doing social and economic equality. We are allocating and distributing resources equally, failing to focus on the heart of the problem and eradicate the disease. We have failed to be specific about who we are serving. Inequity is corrosive for everyone. Extreme inequity corrupts politics, hinders economic growth, stifles social mobility. It squanders talent, thwarts potential, and undermines the foundation of society. And so as you think about how to respond to these shared problems as a society, we have to be thinking at solutions at the scale of the challenge. We have to be moving away from short-term wins to thinking truly about systemic causes that have brought us to this point. Now, make no mistake, I believe traditional human services are the lifeline to our communities. And we are working within sectors who are providing and meeting to close the gaps around food, housing, education, and beyond. And these efforts have to be protected and strengthened. And we're in a moment right now where we see how fragile our communities truly are. And so we need agencies, we need institutions to be able to stand in those gaps. And they are not enough on their own. And so as we deliver strong programs and services, we also have to re-envision the ecosystem and the impact of our work as a whole. And so we need agencies that want to address the social determinants of health. We need agencies working across the entire continuum, from emergency to emergent. Responding only to individual needs can also give us a false sense of progress. We celebrate the number of people we've served through our programs while ignoring the conditions that have made these programs necessary. And so we have to be able to move the needle on a population level scale. We must take a broader view. If we are serious about addressing social determinants of health, we must dismantle the systems that perpetuate inequities and hold people back across generations. There's a slide in here, I think it's coming up here somewhere. It says Northside Forward on it. And that's precisely what the work of Northside Forward is, and it just launched earlier this summer. And it's a comprehensive community development initiative that's going to reshape the future of North Minneapolis over the next decade. And I was leading this work at my previous role, African American Leadership Forum. And that work was really about moving beyond treating symptoms to transforming economic and the social landscape in North Minneapolis through strategic partnerships across corporate, civic, and philanthropic institutions. When we invest in affordable housing alongside quality jobs, when we support Black-owned businesses while improving neighborhood infrastructure, when we pair educational opportunities with accessible capital, we are not just helping individuals climb the economic ladder, we are rebuilding the ladder itself and anchoring it. And so Northside Forward is a 10-year vision to bring $1.5 billion of social and economic capital to North Minneapolis across 6 pillars. It's a transformative big endeavor, and my colleagues at the forum are still moving that work forward. And I want to talk about the work now that I'm leading that is going to be able to help catalyze and fuel that work, which is the GroundBreak Coalition, this coalition of 40 institutions across our community, many corporate and philanthropic institutions. And this work was born out of the incredible Tanya Allen, who is the president of the McKnight Foundation, and came in from Detroit. And I really think always talks about how following George Floyd's murder, we didn't want to just have a bunch of platitudes and programs, but we wanted to make sure that we were able to move the needle. And so built a wonderful system that's focusing on Black wealth building. And I, as the inaugural CEO to now operationalize this work, as Kiera mentioned, it is the objective to bring $5.3 billion of economic activity over the next 10 years to our region. And that work is built on a fundamental belief that it is not charity. It is about true economic transformation. It's about capital. And so my work every day in this new work is taking philanthropic dollars to unlock market rate capital and getting banks to behave differently in this environment, and saying that most of the reason you don't do business in Black and brown communities is because of a perceived risk, not a real risk. Because all the Black folks I know gonna pay their rent on time. And so how do we actually build systems that work for people? And so we've already raised, between our philanthropic resources and our investments from bank, we've raised $1 billion. And so my goal right now is to get that 1 billion moving across our community. And that means it's 3 primary focuses: home ownership, because we know that that is the wealth building tool in America. It's entrepreneurship. And so wherever individuals have an idea about the future and want to be able to start a business, that we're giving forgivable growth loans in order to do that. And then it's commercial real estate. So developers who want to be able to transform their communities. And so the Northside Forward, while there's a plan there, I actually now sit in a position to be able to concentrate capital to individuals who want to reimagine their communities. And this is the type of, I think, transformational endeavors. These are the types of multi-sector collaborations that need to exist in this moment. McKinsey, the group McKinsey Consultants put out a survey, or put out a report last year. And the report said that somewhere between 240 to 300 years for Black, Latino, Native populations across this country, in order to reach parity at where white individuals are at today, it will take 240 to 300 years at the rate in which we are going. So that means at a population level that we won't see it in our lifetime, our grandkids' lifetime, or even perhaps their children. So that means we have to be going further and faster. We can't negotiate between the two. And so this means we have to be the gravitational force, and I believe it is existing within this room. So a couple things I'll leave you with is, I don't know, there was something trending on social media a while ago about empathy, and I still believe it is one of our most critical tools in a society. And I believe that we have to possess it. I believe we have to practice it. And radical transformation emerges when empathy becomes ingrained in our consciousness. To fully create radical transformation, we must first understand what people experience and the context in which they live their lives. It is always important to me to understand what happened before and what happened after. It is always important for me to understand the full context. Empathy allows us to immerse ourselves in that experience. And I believe a virtue and a practice of mine is humility. And that humility, as we go and continue to go into communities, it is about asking them, what do you need, rather than hubris on here's what you need. And as I started this conversation, we always know when we go to people with just deep sense of humility, that they will always tell us what they need. What I know as I close here, what shows up more on a heat map than anything is care. And this has to be our guiding principle for the individuals and communities towards this collective consciousness, one rooted in empathy and understanding. So we are certainly in this moment where we have to balance the hope and the concern. I was meeting with someone last night, a gentleman who is the co-founder of White Men for Racial Justice or Healing. And I found myself sitting with him and being more cynical than I perhaps have. And sometimes I think even in spaces like this, if we constantly are only in spaces like this and only around people who validate our own experiences and our own knowledge, we can also be in an echo chamber. And I'm oftentimes trying to break outside of that echo chamber. And not because I'm trying to shift people, but I'm trying to get a deeper understanding of what is behind how people are feeling in this moment. What is driving them? And that has put me in a lot of uncomfortable spaces, but I think we have to lean into that. If there's The Tears of Things by Father Richard Rohr, if any of you've read it, wonderful book. And what he describes in there is that people still don't know that this world was built for and with love. And when you're balancing this hope and concern, you're going, okay, what's going to get us on the other side of this? And there was two things that were offered up in that, and it's great love or great suffering. Those are the two things that will get us on the other side of either one. And we can choose. Will it be great love or great suffering? And so my cynicism last night was going, I don't think it feels like we're in a moment where people actually want great suffering. That we want the dismantling of things, that we are still localizing hate in other people without truly doing the introspective thing, without truly evaluating what sits in front of us. And I believe that because of such deep polarization in our country, and it's not an 80-20, it's more like a 50-50. And a large part of this is that the ones that are leaning into a moment of great suffering have a platform, have a stage, have power. And my faith tells me that my Redeemer lives. And so I have to believe that we equally have the power. I think we're starting to see, and we will see folks rise up that says, no, we don't want great suffering. That the antidote to that is great love. And so we must be grounded in reality, and we must continue to be concerned but that needs to fuel our determination to address the root causes of social problems and to advocate for long-standing systemic change. I believe that everyone in this room is a repairer of the breach. We're repairers. And that means that we have to go to those margins, walk alongside individuals who are trying to fight their way back to the center. We must eradicate a system that is unintentionally or intentionally hostile to people. So in closing, the imperative, whether you choose to do this work or not, here's one thing that is imperative. Good charity work should be informing good policy and systems work. And so the individuals who come through your doors, who you interact with, are your sources of innovation. They own the solutions to their problem. I believe that the generative thinking is in this room. And these types of gatherings, these types of convenings are about strategically connecting the dots, forming and fostering the relationships that are necessary to fuel this type of movement. The road ahead will be challenging. It is, but it is also filled with incredible opportunities. And so as you think about this movement, the quote that I am reminded of is, and that I continue to hold, is that our communities don't need saviors. They need people whose liberation is deeply bound with theirs. Thank you all.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so thank you so much. We have time for questions, and so there are mic runners that can pass mics if you have questions for our keynote speaker. And while you all are thinking about it, I think I want to appreciate the way that you're telling stories. And I've been at a couple national meetings for cancer centers lately, and it's been a consistent theme that I've heard all year is how we tell stories, how we change narratives about community. And I think that sitting in this space, in our research space, is something that we are wrestling with always. So I'm wondering, trust is central to the work, I believe. What does it take for health and research institutions to really earn back trust from communities that historically have been shut out of, the work that comes out of institutions like this, or not in good partnership with institutions?
Yeah, great question. My response to that is, I think that institutions have to be authentic, and that what you have to also acknowledge is that every interaction with someone is a moment, should heal them. And I've told this to every institution and people that I've come in contact with, is that I should have such radical hospitality. I should have such radical care for you that it should heal you from any experience you've had before me. And so if we hold that every experience we have with someone should heal them, whether it's in our institutions or in our own personal lives. The other thing is that trust to me is about a set of consistent experiences over time. And so if you want to build trust, and you have to do the acknowledgement that saying, yes, systems have been harmful, they've been extractive, they've perpetuated, we've done things, and there's always a moment, even with all of that, there's always a moment to get it right. And that means, however, we have to have a set of consistent experiences over time. And the last thing I'll say is that actually isn't no different than how we form relationships, how we form them with our partners, how we form them with our friends. You build the trust because That person gives you a set of consistent experiences over time. You know that they're going to do the thing in which they say they are going to do. And so our institutions also have to do that. And we're not perfect. And when we do wrong, we don't write some corporate letter that we authentically go to people and acknowledge the hurt and pain. We take accountability for our actions and we ask them, will you give me another chance?
Okay. I have one more question. As you think about GroundBreak Coalition's mission and the kinds of investments that you're going to make in community and building the ecosystem in Minneapolis, in the region, what do you think could be the greatest impact on health for those investments?
Yeah. The greatest impact is what I believe everyone in this room knows, is that health happens outside of a hospital. And 80 to 90% of that health is outside of a clinical setting. And so when we build more healthy and thriving communities, when we make sure that people have the safety and security, when we create the conditions for individuals to be able to live their self-actualized and self-determined future, that is health. And every day, I think we need to continue, whether it's through our policies, our practices, and institutions, continue to reframe that this is health. And so the critical investments that we need to be making in community and in people, we need to make strategic investments in people, and that will build a healthy ecosystem that will make people less dependent on a system that wasn't all that well built to care. And so I think we go to where we know the source of innovation, where the source of care is, and that is in community.
Right over here. Hey.
How you doing, brother?
I'm good. I'm good.
Don't tell people how we met. I'm in the bathroom washing my hands and hiccup, brother.
Good to see you again.
You too.
Yeah, my name is Beal Wheel. And so the question I have for you, to give some context, I work in a startup. So I'm very involved in the space of innovation around products and services. What I know about whether you're improving society and people and nations or products and companies, both require innovation for transformation. Something I have learned in my experiences is that there's a different kind of critique when investing in people versus investing in products and businesses. People invest billions on products that may fail, and they fail all the time. But I feel with nonprofits, government initiatives, people initiatives, there's much more critique about it needs to succeed or it's not worth it at all. We're willing to invest money in products to sell to people, but not money to invest in people themselves. And so I have two kind of questions for you. First, have you had to deal with, because I know you mentioned before you work in growth and innovation strategy with Pillsbury. As you move into this space, have you had to deal with having to hire a wall or bar to almost like a higher expectation in this space to prove it can work versus your experience in the corporate world? My second question is, you seem to understand too that it requires systemic change for real progress. You have a 10-year plan. So I wonder, over 10 years, it's not gonna be perfect, I'm sure. There's gonna be ups and downs. So how do you continue to show there's progress being made even when things go wrong? You put in an initiative or a program, it needs another go at it. How do you keep ensuring community investors invest in you and the mission?
Yeah, thank you.
Hope that's clear. I know it's a lot of words.
Yeah, I think I heard everything that you've stated. So a couple things in that we have to just acknowledge that the systems that are born out of our own thinking are backward as hell. And they're self-sabotaging and they're self-deprecating and all of the things, because the amount of money that we spend across this country, frankly, on things that don't matter when they could be investments directly in people. And somehow we formed a narrative that people would rather go without, they would rather hurt than actually say that our government, our institutions should be making strategic investments in people. And that is backward thinking, right? But yet I think it's the kind of, it's that bootstrap mentality in which everything is built on, frankly, in this country. And when we talk about making investments in people, we brand it as socialism. We brand it all these things that are kind of antithetical to our beliefs, as because we know that direct investments actually in people are the solution. And so part of us is helping to reframe that narrative and constantly, and to show that we are making investments in people. We've just chosen the kinds of people who we deem worthy of making those investments in. And I think we need to shine a light on that as a society. Tax breaks are an investment in people. So that's my first response to that. And then the second question around, that inherent to any good strategy is failure, and how do you continue to prove? What I also believe that we haven't done as a sector, and assuming everybody is generally in the same sector or working along the same issues, is social innovation has not gotten both the critical investments that it needs, the type of thinking, because we are trying to change a product and or service. And so when you think about where innovations, like the locus of innovation that exists across this country, it's not actually been in how do we deal with these entrenched problems? How might we do the kind of massive investments that is equal to Silicon Valley, but on social issues across our country? Because that we know would have such tremendous impact across our economy if we were to solve for those inequities. And so what you have to constantly do, why I think story narrative is so important, is constantly bringing people back to what does change actually look like? And helping people to reframe that every day someone is spending millions, if not billions, on products that are going to fail, that may not ever reach market. And yet we don't extend the same grace to work of humans. And that and the context, that's a controlled environment. The work that we're doing is far less controlled. The social and economic conditions that exist in communities is far more unpredictable. And yet we are trying to solve these entrenched inequities across our society. And so I think we have to constantly bring people back to that. We can't let people frame their own narrative. We can't allow a void, because people will feel it. And so that's my work over this next decade, is ensuring that people understand that this is hard work. And even if I don't meet the big goals, is that we need to learn and we need to try again.
Okay, yeah.
It works.
It's working?
Yeah.
Okay, first I'll start with appreciation. Those of you who organize this conference, thank you so much. Because when there is a lot of cut regarding research, you know what's happening in NHS and many research sectors, regardless of that you are able to host and organize this great meeting. You guys are great. Thank you. That being said, by profession, I'm a teacher. So I want you clarify for us what you guys specifically doing with North High or generally around school. And the second clarification I need is, you said we are repair of the bridge. Can you clarify that? By the way, thank you for sharing your work. I appreciate what you're doing too. Thanks.
So to your latter point, certainly, if any of you know, a study of the Bible, frankly, and it talks about repairs of the breach. And what in this moment, what I'm saying is that we are in a society that is deeply broken, and that there's a breach. There's a breach in our institutions. There's a breach in the moral contract. There's a breach in all the things, right? On every dimension. And there's a breach in how we treat each other. So I could continue to go on and name so many. And what I do believe is that the individuals who have made it their life's work to repair that, to do the hard work that is necessary to transform systems, to do the work to repair brokenness, to where systems are failing people, where it should not be. And so that statement is born out of the thinking that I believe that the folks in this room are here for a reason, because they want to continue to work towards this more perfect union and want to repair it in all its forms. The question around education is, while my work is not directly centered on education today, I've worked the last 15 years in it, trying to think about how we transform education. And my opinion is that we are still using 19th and 20th century practices in the 21st century. And so failing our kids to prepare them for a future in which they can thrive. That's my blanket statement. And that's broken down, frankly, by adults arguing amongst themselves and not centering the needs of children. Blanket statement, not all individuals. And so I think when we look at, there's data out that actually most kids can't read in today's society, or at the level in which they should be. And then that disparity is abysmal as you disaggregate that data by race. And so I do think that in this moment, we need to be really thinking about the transformation that needs to happen in education. We need to be holding our systems more accountable. We need to, while I'm generally a big supporter of those who labor in the classrooms and in education, I also want to say that we're not doing enough in this moment to meet the moment and prepare our young people. And if you ask me if a system that is probably most harmful to Black and brown youth today, I'd say education. Because to me, that is the most galvanizing in equal force that we have in our society. And we are failing our young kids to prepare them. And so I think it's it's deeply broken, and so more largely, and it only plays out right now because our district and our teachers union are thinking about a contract and how it's going to educate young people. So.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you for the questions. Adair, thank you so much for your insight, for your leadership, for your vision, and sharing that with us today. Our keynote really connects with our theme when we're thinking about advancing prevention, health equity, shifting our systems, centering community voices, having conversations like this, repairing trust. I want to invite each of you to continue to think about what you've learned here today, and take that with you into your community to help with narratives, to share messages, to share resources, to show up for one another. And a lot of these small steps done together, we can change outcomes. We can start to help with shift. We're going to take a quick 10-minute break, 5-minute break, says Amna, before our final session of the day. So thank you. Please, yes.
Thank you all.